Chris Watts, the father, killed his family. We humans are very different in terms of character. Among us is the bad one, the one with strong qualities and the evil soul, and among us is also the good one, the one with a broad vision and a bright, balanced soul. We are always like this. We differ from each other in many things. Perhaps the most bad and abnormal of these differences in our history, which is full of tragedies, is that you kill your soulmate and your life partner. Perhaps it is certain that the murderous father, Chris Watts, is a very bad example of our well-known human models, where he was a murderer and a traitor at the same time. The Watts family. I don't think that all those beautiful smiles are just fake smiles. This heinous crime is one of the most heinous crimes, which in turn shook public opinion in the United States of America. This crime occurred on August 13, 2018. Where husband Chris Watts, his wife Shannon, and their two daughters, Bella, 4 years old, and Celeste, 3 years old, came to their home in Colorado, after a short family trip. The next day, Shannon didn't show up at work as usual, which prompted her coworker to ask for help and call the police immediately to check her condition. When a father is devoid of mercy. When police arrived at Chris Watts' family home, no one was found inside. But Shannon's phone was found. Her wallet is inside the house. Husband Chris came home after a long day at work and found the police. After they were allowed to search the house, the police did not find any member of the missing family. After the husband underwent lie detector tests because he was the only individual left before the police, he failed them. Watts was quickly arrested as a suspect. Chris quickly confessed everything to the police. After preliminary investigations, it turned out that Chris had strangled his wife, who was pregnant, and their two daughters to death, and hid the children's bodies inside an oil field near the house. He boldly buried them in a small hole, and buried his wife in a cemetery at his work site. The bodies of the victims were not found until several days after their disappearance. Police directed all search efforts towards the oil fields near Chris Watts' home after they suspected something was there. The killer's daughters. He killed them with a blanket in the back of his truck. In investigations conducted by the police, it was found that Chris Watts had begun a new relationship with a woman other than his wife. And he was planning to separate from his wife, Shannon, as soon as possible. He was directly charged with premeditated murder. In a newspaper interview with the killer's mistress, Chris Watts, the woman revealed that unknown behavioral changes had occurred in her husband's personality days before the crime. As a result of his heinous act, Chris Watts was fired from his job. He buried the bodies of his children at the headquarters of his former employer, which owned a hydrocarbon exploration company where Chris Watts worked. As a result of this heinous crime, the murderous husband was sentenced to life imprisonment without the right to parole. He is still serving his sentence in federal prison in Wisconsin. To this day, this crime has shocked and upset public opinion in the United States of America, and has been considered the deadly curtain, the story of the Bloody Binder family. In 1870, the U.S. Congress stole vast lands from the Osage Indian tribes in southern Kansas and distributed them to white settlers. They began to flock in large numbers from the east in the hope of achieving wealth in the American West, and the Bender family was one of those families dreaming of a better future, but they distinguished themselves from others by the strange way they chose to achieve their dream. The family built a wooden cabin on the road between the cities of Thayer and Carlsberg. It was not a wonderful or special place in nature, but it provided a good job opportunity for the family. They divided their hut into two parts, separated by a huge curtain. They used the back part as a home for the family and turned the front part into a hostel for travelers, where they provided them with food, drink, and shelter. The family consisted of Mr. and Mrs. Bender, who were in their 50s, their young son, John, and their beautiful daughter, Katie. No one knows for sure the origin of the family. Some believe that they were of German origins and others deny this, but everyone agrees that they spoke little and mingled with others, except Katie, who was a beautiful young woman and an eloquent speaker. She claimed to be a spiritual medium and that she could communicate with the dead and heal diseases. She performed magic shows in several small towns in Kansas, winning the admiration of many men who were fascinated by her towering stature. Gradually, some of these admirers began to frequent the family cabin to see her, but like many of the travelers who dined at the Binder Inn, they disappeared and were never seen again. The family was looking for rich men, and when they found one of them, their chances of escaping the clutches of the murderous Binders were very slim. Once the family is sure that their guest is a rich man and that he is carrying money or valuables with him, Katie uses her stunning beauty to persuade him to stay with the family for dinner. Then she sits him in a special place at the table with his back towards the curtain that separates the two parts of the hut, while Katie serves the guest food and distracts him with words. With a sweet tooth and promising looks, Mr. Bender or his son is standing behind the curtain with a huge iron hammer in his hand and suddenly strikes the guest's head with it, crushing his skull. They kill him instantly with one blow, then they quickly drag him to the back of the hut, where the family cooperates to strip him of his clothes and rob him of everything he owns. Then they throw him temporarily in a cellar under the hut, waiting for the right opportunity to take him out. He was buried in a small garden surrounded by trees where Mrs. Pinder had grown vegetables. Since the police and means of communication at that time were primitive, it was not surprising that people suddenly disappeared, especially in Kansas, where there were problems between settlers and Native American tribes. Therefore, it was not strange for travelers to disappear, especially those traveling alone, and thus the family continued to carry out its crimes for 18 months without anyone suspecting it. During this period, the carefully hidden graves in Mrs. Pender's garden increased, but it was impossible for the situation to last, and the end of the family's crimes came on the day that Dr. William York became her guest. He was an admirer of Katie's stunning beauty, and it was not the first time he spent the night at the family inn, but it was the last time he would see or hear from anyone again. The family killed him one night in the summer of 1873 and buried his body the next day in Mrs. Bender's garden. Unfortunately for the family, the victim's brother was a colonel in the American Army, and the victim had told him that he would spend a night at the Pender Inn while he was traveling there. Therefore, after his brother slowed him down, Colonel York decided to search for him, which led him to knock on the door of the Pender family's house to ask about him, but the family told him that they had not seen him, that he had not spent the night with them, and that he might have been attacked by Native Americans. This seemed like a more believable possibility in the eyes of the colonel, but he did not leave the family home that evening due to the late hour, so he decided to stay for dinner and spend the night at the inn. That night, after he had eaten dinner, Colonel York was sitting alone in the front part of the family hut, and suddenly he noticed something shining under one of the beds. So he picked it up to discover that it was a medallion, and when he opened it, he found inside it a picture of his missing brother's wife and his daughter. He then realized that the Bender family were lying to him, and that his brother had spent a night in their hostel, and that he might have been exposed to something bad. For fear of meeting the same fate, Colonel York quietly and cautiously left the hut, then crawled towards the stable and mounted his horse, quickly heading towards the city of Thayer, where he headed directly towards the sheriff's office. The next morning, the colonel, accompanied by the sheriff and several men, returned to the Binder family's hut, and to their great surprise, the hut was empty. It seems that the family sensed danger after the colonel's sudden disappearance from their hut at night, so they gathered their belongings and fled under the cover of darkness. The sheriff and his men quickly began searching inside the family hut and the land surrounding it. During the search, one of the men noticed holes and piles of dirt that appeared to be recent in Mrs. Bender's garden, so they dug them up to uncover the first bodies of the victims. It was the body of Dr. William York. Then they discovered more bodies, and by evening they had exhumed more than 20 bodies. They also found several metal hammers that the family had used to carry out their crimes. Soon a major campaign began to find the family. Groups of horsemen searched the district inch by inch to arrest them, but to no avail. The family disappeared completely and no one ever saw them again. Opinions and stories differed about their fate. One of these stories says that a group of horsemen were chasing the family. They arrested her near the state border and decided to enforce the law themselves, so they shot all the family members to death, except for the beautiful Katie. They buried her alive because, in their view, she was the main driver and planner of all the crimes. Then they swore and pledged among themselves not to tell anyone what they had done. However, this story and other stories were never proven true, and the disappearance of the family remained a mystery that baffled people for many decades, during which many women were arrested on suspicion of being Katie, but the accusation was not proven against anyone. It is also not known what the real number of victims of the family is, as more than 20 bodies were found in Mrs. Bender's garden. But did these bodies represent the true number of the family's victims? Or are there more buried in other areas? The family may have committed their crimes even before they came to Kansas, and they may have continued to do so after they fled from it. No one knows for sure, as all that remains of the Binder family's crimes is a small museum in Kansas, whose contents include 3 iron hammers that the family used to kill their victims. The story of the burning star. In the last year of university, I went on a trip with my friends to a small island in the middle of the river, an old house owned by an acquaintance, but he does not live there but rather rents it to people. There, my friends and I suffered from sleep paralysis for a long period of time while staying in that place, which prompted the employees to cut short their trip to the city, but I decided to continue my vacation in this quiet place. But my first night alone, something happened that I could not account for. That night, hours after I slept, and it was just before sunset, there was noise and groaning all around me at the slightest courage to get up. But sleep paralysis prevented me from doing so. I opened my eyes with difficulty to find a red light in front of me. I do not know where the ice came from, that there was movement in the room. He confessed hard until he was ready to take control when everything had disappeared, the red light as well as the sound, and everything was calm again. But I was very afraid, so I stayed awake until the morning. With the hours of the day, I had forgotten what happened until the evening came, and the matter happened again when I decided to leave the place. So I called the owner of the boat from which we had arrived here before, and as soon as I arrived in the city, the owner of the island house went and gave him the keys to the house. When he asked me why my vacation was cut short, I told him what had happened. His words shocked me completely. He told me that he had left the house immediately after its owner died because of what the family had suffered there. Last year's what happened there? He said, years ago, my daughter was going to play outside, and when she returned home, she left her toys there. So her grandfather, that is, my father, went to get the toys so that no one would benefit from them. At that time, the residents of the island used to leave except us, after leaving here. The grandfather came back and he was pale and fear was evident on him. He saw a ghost. What is the matter when you are so pale and sweaty? My mother asked him, but he did not have to put his hand on his forehead. He said he is told to sleep because he feels so tired, but my brother and I know the reason why my father is there where my daughter cannot. We take the grass burning, not in a way, but rather the various parts were a large circle on the ground, and yes, it had a 5-pointed star and some various writing. Yes, it was a big burning pentagram that scared us a lot. Perhaps anyone would think that the matter was just a joke, but the grass did not grow in that area and did not last after that incident. He pointed out that the matter was bigger and more dangerous than a joke. We also knew that some of the people residing on the island at the time seemed to be practicing magic. I wondered, is this what you want, leave the island and never return to it? He said, this is almost in addition to the red man's harassment of us. Who is the red man, he asked. He said that he saw himself in the island house. Do not think that you are the first person he meets, as he lives there and many people have appeared before and at different times. Yang Xinhai, the deadly Chinese monster. The most dangerous serial killers in China. He is a serial killer who left China's top investigators baffled. He committed his crimes with great intelligence, as the police were not even close to identifying him. He exterminated entire families and raped more than 20 women without batting an eyelid or moving a conscience. What is the story behind Yang Xinhai, the Chinese serial killer? Piles of corpses. On November 3, 2003, police conducted a routine search of a leisure home in Songzhou City, Hebei Province, China. You weren't looking for any dangerous criminal. But just because Yang Xinhai felt uncomfortable during the inspection and started acting suspiciously, he was arrested and investigated. The serial killer Yang Xinhai. Continued interrogation and DNA analysis revealed that the man in their custody was killed without mercy. There were a total of 67 brutal murders in a relatively short period of 3 years. It did not take Yang Xinhai long to confess that he had brutally killed more than 60 people and raped many women. Xinhai's DNA has been linked to several different crime scenes spread across 4 provinces, Anhui, Shandong, Hebei, and Henan, with Henan as the center of Yang Xinhai's sordid activities. With the DNA evidence and Xinhai's testimony, the authorities had a watertight case against Xinhai, and nothing short of the death penalty. Yang was later convicted of 67 murders and 23 rapes and 26 separate killings, which also left 10 people seriously injured. When I killed people, I had a desire. This killing inspired me even more. I don't care if they deserve to live or not, it doesn't matter to me. I have no desire to be part of society. Society doesn't matter to me. But who is Yang Xinhai? He was born on July 29, 1968, in Chengyang Town, Jumadian, Henan Province, China. Among one of the poorest families in the village. Yang Xinhai, also known as Yang Jia and Yang Lu, was the youngest of his brothers. As a young boy, he was intelligent but introverted and did not interact with others easily. Yang did not apply his intelligence to study, so he stopped in 1985 at the age of 17. He began working odd jobs, working mostly as a general laborer. However, he did not strive for a simple and upright life and got into trouble in 1988 when he was sent to a labor camp for theft. But this did not change him. He received another sentence in 1991 for theft again. The punishment appears to have had no deterrent or corrective effect on Yang. In 1996, he was convicted of attempted rape in Jumadian, Henan Province, and sentenced to 5 years in prison. Somehow, It was released early in 2000. Yang did not give any specific reason for the killing, which he began in the same year of his release, other than that he had a strong desire to kill. However, a report published in the Yanzhou Duxi newspaper claimed that since Yang was sentenced to prison and labor reform camps on charges of robbery and rape, his girlfriend had broken up with him, and as a result, he had developed a vindictive attitude towards society. The murders seemed like random killings. It is not that he killed without planning or struck impulsively like an animal driven by instinct. Not only did he plan his crimes at least a few hours in advance, he also thought about how to escape detection and arrest. For a long time, the police had no clue who they were looking for because Yang was wearing shoes of various sizes and types during the killings. He burned the clothes and shoes after each killing spree. Moreover, he did not use a fixed weapon to kill. Use axes, shovels, knives, and hammers for this purpose. All these tools are familiar things. This made it difficult for the police to proceed with the investigation. In most cases, Yang murdered entire families and left behind no living witness. Yang Xinhai, a monster with a human appearance. A farmer named Lu Zanwei lived in Luzhong village, Shipping, Henan province, in his late 30s, with his family consisting of his parents, wife, son and daughter. They had managed to build a new house and decided to move in on December 9, 2002. Lu's father, Lu Zhongyuan, aged 68, slept in the new house at night. But fate had something terrible in store for them. On the night of December 6, 2002, Yang Xinhai entered the house around midnight. He hit each family member in the head and face several times with a hammer, causing Lu Zanwei's wife to die instantly, as well as his son and daughter. His mother survived but with serious injuries. She finally died of her injuries in hospital 10 days later. The only individual to survive the massacre was Lu Zhongyuan, Lu Zanwei's 68-year-old father, simply because he was sleeping in the new house and was not with the rest of his family on the fateful night. He killed and exterminated without any mercy. Lu Zhongyuan later replayed the horrific scene of his granddaughter lying in a pool of blood with a hole in her head. The house was soaked with the blood of his loved ones. The fact that a hammer caused the deaths only came to light when Yang Xinhai confessed to using a hammer to kill the family after his arrest. He also told police during interrogation that after the killing, he buried the hammer near a grave and threw his clothes into a river. It was not clear whether the authorities had recovered the hammer or clothes. Little information regarding the details of the crimes committed by Yang Xinhai has been released to the ant by investigative agencies. Due to the lack of information, people living in the 4 provinces were unaware that a serial killer was on the prowl. It is not difficult to say that by preventing the dissemination of information relating to the murders, the government has placed a large number of unsuspecting people, throughout the 4 provinces, in danger of life. After the arrest, the story of Yang Xinhai's arrest came to light when a few journalists in Songzhou where he was arrested heard from several sources about who Yang Xinhai was and what he did. However, the police remained silent on the issue. Long after the story was published without official confirmation, officials from the authorities confirmed some details of Yang's arrest and crimes to the North China Morning Bulletin. After Yang's arrest, Shi Gizong, director of the Public Security Bureau's prosecution department, reportedly told AFP that he had confirmed that there were at least 65 victims. Although the case has been solved in Hebei, it involves several provinces, so it is up to the Ministry of Public Security to clear the information, he added. Police officials in other provinces where Yang was killed refused to reveal anything, except that there were orders from the Ministry of Public Security not to speak to the media about the case. Yang was executed by a gunshot to the head. As for Yang's trial, the trial reportedly lasted less than an hour before Yang Xinhai was found guilty of killing 67 people and raping 25 women on February 1, 2004, by the Intermediate People's Court of Luohe City, Henan Province. Yang was sentenced to death, which was carried out just as quickly on February 14, 2004, and was executed by a gunshot wound to the head. Even the details or identities of Yang's victims have not been revealed to the public.